Okay. Okay, so let's see. I just want to do a quick sound check with everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, so there's going to be a lag. I just want to do a quick sound check with everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah?
Echo.
So there's going to be a lag. I just want to do a quick sound check with everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, there's a major lag.
Yeah. Can you still hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Can one of you talk?
Hello, hello. This is...
Yeah, and what I'm also getting is like a reverberating echo. All right, is anybody else hearing that?
I heard it initially, it's gone now.
Yeah, and what I'm also getting is
Oh, there's the... I'm getting the echo.
is anybody else hearing that? I'm hearing myself back at myself.
Could it be, Adelia, is your speaker on and you're watching the YouTube along with the Zoom?
Yeah, let me...
If you mute your YouTube, you won't get, I don't think you'll get the...
Okay, let's do that. So Barbara Tally is saying hello to all of you. And I'm going to mute my YouTube real quick. There we go. I think that's going to be better. All these little things you got to remember, man, when you do this. Oh, someday I'll have a producer and they'll do all this for me, right? Okay. Can everyone hear me good? All right, can one of you guys unmute and just talk? So I can make sure I hear you.
Hi.
Yes, much better. Thank you, Anissa, for reminding me to mute my YouTube. I did it on my laptop, but I didn't do it here on my computer. So
Yeah, there's like a 57-second lag.
Say, Anissa?
There's like a 57-second lag.
Yes, there's a very long lag right now.
That's common. That's normal when you're live streaming to a different platform.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna let Miss and you guys, let's see here. Hey there, Miss Barbara. So glad you got to join us today. And so we're gonna go ahead and get started. It is now 8:06 EST. And so just to introduce myself, my name is Adelia, and I have created a course called Our Moral Imperative, a Revolutionary Change in White America. And so what we're trying to do is, like, once a month, do these panel discussions that give people an opportunity to have these conversations, but in an environment that's welcoming and warm and open, and isn't combative. And I think that's really important for for us to be able to have this conversation. And because we're going to be talking about the role of white and white passing people in these, in these efforts towards racial unity, I just really want to thank all of you who are panelists that agreed to do this. So just so everyone knows, everyone who's on the panel are actually people who've been coming to our moral imperative, and they've come to different cohorts. And so how about briefly, each one of you just introduce yourself, say where you're from, and then, we'll get started. And we'll start with whoever wants to go first. Is cool with me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Melissa Hooker Foley. I am a resident of Pennsylvania, and I have taken Adelia's course, and it's been quite a journey inward to just some great conversations that I've had in the most recent past with other white people.
Thank you, Melissa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anissa Cameron. I am an American, but I live in Montreal, Canada. And I have known Adelia for almost 30 years and just kind of reconnected with her through this class. And I'm really honored to be here and hope that I can contribute something to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa.
My name is Huda Hussaini, and I'm Iranian background. And as soon as I saw Adelia's course on her Facebook page, and I follow her on Facebook, because she's so brilliant, I thought, this is a course for me. So I'm very, very happy that I joined.
Thank you so much, Hoda.
I'm Elizabeth Ellis. Many people call me Liz, but my name is Elizabeth. I took the initial course. Adelia did a test course, and myself and a few other friends, people that I knew, and actually one of my nieces took it. So it's been about a 3-4, almost a year effort of doing this, and it's very, very it's really broadened my feeling of understanding, and also the depth of what we're doing. So thank you, Adelia.
She happens to be my mom too. Did you say that?
Mm-mm.
I did.
You don't want to claim me, huh?
Oh, I want to claim you, but in case I say something that I say, then you don't get. Oh,
That's her mom.
Protection.
So thank you all for joining. And so we're just going to jump right in. So those of you who are here, I just want to tell you guys, we've got a number of people who joined us. Felice is here. Nika is here. They've joined Miss Barbara. Leah is here. Kat and Zolani are here. And so thank you guys for joining us. Please, as we go forward with the conversation, feel free to post your questions in the chat. And the way this is going to work is each panelist, I'm going to be asking each one of them direct questions. But then in between each response, we will also be answering your questions. Okay. So, yeah. So I'd like to get started with Melissa, because I feel like the topic that you and I discussed, you talking about, I think is so important. especially for, just the time we're in right now, where just having conversations is just around race, and just having conversations period around things that people think are controversial it's been really difficult. And so I would like for you to, if you could please share with the folks who are here and the other panelists, what your experience has been engaging in conversations, and then like what you have done to continue those conversations. So yeah.
Thank you. I think if you asked me 3 months ago, what was going to happen with the next white person that I was going to engage in conversation, so a friend, a coworker, whoever, I would have said to you, all right, I'm ready to lose this friend, I'm ready to lose this friend, I'm ready to lose this friend, because my approach at that time was one of, how can you not love another human being? What is it that you are going to say to me against that? Right. And so, now fast forward, after realizing my shortcomings and the need to approach other white people, and you and I, Adelia, have had the conversation on the word palatable, making, things palatable for other white people to hear, to engage in conversations. I personally don't like that word, but I understand that there is an approach now. And now I see the importance in engaging in people who are not on the anti-racist path. It's painful, but I've realized the need to lean in to these conversations. So, and I only found that out really through your course. Your course takes people on an inward journey. And, when you're fired up about healing the hearts and minds of people who have, racist tendencies and thoughts and feelings, you really have to figure out a way to keep them engaged, and how you're going to lean in. And so I've really kind of, over the past, now I'd say 3 months, have had such an array of conversations. So just so the viewing audience has a little background to me, I grew up in a very diverse, multicultural upbringing. And then I went to college and it became very white. And then I graduated from college and I moved to the suburbs, also very white. And I'm now in a very homogeneous, again, white population. And a lot of my friends happen to hold conservative views, and they are not on the path of any anti-racist work. So after having a couple after observing people have conversations where their approach, and this was my approach too, was I'm gonna change their mind. Surely I'm gonna say some brilliant, witty things that they are just gonna have no other option than to change their racist views overnight. And so I kind of, and this is not easy for me, I'm get in there and get dirty type, but I had to sit back after taking your course and realizing, moving away from guilt and shame and the feelings of superiority in conversations, even, and someone who's trying to be a cycle breaker, the importance of moving towards, away from guilt and shame and towards empathy and action. I was able to devise my approach. And so I've realized 3 things, I think, in the many conversations I've had with my dear, dear friends that, before George Floyd, they're still my heart and soul. They're my friends. I feel like I know their heart, and these racist views, whether they are overt or silent, I can't give up on them. And so my approach was really important, right? So approaching another white person, or, you know, another person who is not of color, and having the mindset of planting seeds and not necessarily having that change overnight mindset has really helped. So that's one thing I've learned. The second thing that I've learned is, how do I keep them engaged in our current conversation, right? So it's a lot of question asking, right? So finding out what they need. What do you need to make this situation that you think is so terrible and so scary and so dangerous right? And so really asking questions instead of spewing off statistics and facts really keeps people engaged. And then the third thing is getting those people to come back and pick up where we left off. So not just one conversation and done, but let's debate. Let's figure out if there is a common ground. And most of the time, through that question asking, I'm able to get them to say their thoughts out loud, you know, because they'll come with a sound bite and they expect you to come back with stats and, you know, facts, that they can somehow debunk and get you all wound up to the point where you don't have any other recourse but to stop the conversation. But if you can kind of like ask questions, move, like, you know, kind of like a dance. So that's some of the that's kind of the approach that I've taken with some of my friends. And I have to tell you, having now multiple conversations with some of who I think are super smart people, but have these racist views, the multiple conversations shows me that they almost just needed a sounding board for what was up here. And I'm really finding that if you can lean in, and if you, the person who's willing to lean in, has, you know, a long-term engagement strategy for having, you know, the ability to lean in, that those people who aren't doing anti-racist work right now have the capacity to lessen their racist views. You know, I haven't turned anyone into being an activist, but I will let you know when that happens. But I feel like there is there's a need for them to be heard as well. And in hearing and then coming back with just gentle debate and discourse has really been heartwarming to me.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I think that has been one of the big things I enjoyed learning from you and other people who have taken the course, is how you have devised different, you know, strategies for keeping those conversations going. Because so much of this is about either building friendships or building on the friendships that already exist, right? And when you build friendships, there's trust, and when you have trust, there's an openness and a willingness to talk. And then we've seen how friendship and understanding can be the thing that shifts. So thank you so much for sharing that approach. We haven't gotten any questions yet, so from our audience. So I'm just going to move on to our next panelist. And thank you so much, Melissa. And what I did do, Melissa, is I did go through and type all of your points into the chat so that people can go back and see it later, just like the approach you took for being able to continue conversations. So the next kind of topic I really am interested in hearing, and I would love for everyone else to hear about too, is from Anissa. Some of you know that I'm a Latin dance instructor and, you know, involved in the arts. And I've been in conversations with people of color about the Afro-Latin dance community. And it's going to be really interesting to see what the dance community is like after COVID-19 is over, because the conversations that we're having as people of African descent is really powerful. And yeah, so I would love for Anissa to share kind of the experience that she's having with the arts as far as theater is concerned, and inclusion and diversity within theater, and what those conversations are looking like. So yeah.
Thanks, Adelia.
Thank you, Anissa.
Thank you. Yeah, my background is in theater, and I worked as a theater practitioner for most of my life. And it seems to me like this conversation and the actions that are taking place to back up the talk that has been happening really started to happen along the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2016, 2015, 2016. And also along the same lines as the Me Too movement that happened around the same time. And, we always say life imitates, or art imitates life, or life imitates art. And really, unfortunately, there is a lot of racism and racist practices in the theater world and theater arts. And normally, we would think as artists that we're more in tune and we're more unified and we're all in this like great work. We work towards this common goal of, in the theater, it's in the common goal of telling a story in production. And so the conversations have kind of turned from diversity and inclusion on the stage or on film to what are the stories that we are telling, who are telling those stories, and who is supporting the work of telling those stories. And so there is a much larger movement now towards equity, diversity, and inclusion in every level of producing art. So there's a lot of conversation about, how do you structure your board of directors and who is on that board of directors? Is your board of directors like a panel of all white people? And if so, those performers who are on stage, or the artists who are taking that leap of faith and trust in your company, they need to feel supported and heard, and that their best interest is being taken to heart. And so there is a movement now to change the landscape of the, like from the top down, right? So from the board of directors to your artistic directors to the general managers and all of the support backstage, whether it's your stage managers or your designers, there is a movement towards trying to include a much more diverse population of theater practitioners who are supporting the art that's being done on stage, because there's been a lot of work done in creating diversity on stage, and there's definitely a long way to go in creating more opportunities for performance, but a lot of work needs to now be done behind the scenes to support that vision. And I think as artists, we are concerned with that. And it's been a lot of soul searching and looking inward. And, for some people, it looks like standing up and stepping aside and making a space to offer that opportunity for other people to step in and be able to direct or choose the season or lead a company or guide the board of directors, whatever that might be. And so that's the major discussion that's happening now across the theater world. And we want to be able to walk the talk that we've been talking. You know, I don't think there's anybody who makes their living as a theater artist who's not concerned and doesn't want to see a change in the industry.
So how important do you think, though, how important do you think it is for this shift to happen in theater, in dance, in all art forms?
It's essential. It has to happen, and it will happen. And you know, all of our industries, if you're in the performing arts right now, you've been hit exceptionally hard by COVID-19. Our theaters are closed. Actors, everyone who's associated with the performing arts is out of work right now, unless you are, you know, doing online work or you've been able to get a creation grant or, you know, something like that. Most of us are staring down the barrel of unemployment for the foreseeable future. But that kind of tragic loss of our employment has offered an opportunity for the space and the time to reflect, to meet, to consult, and to ask for, you know, guidance in terms of our diverse communities as to what they would like to see this industry transformed into. So in that regard, I have really high hopes for what we will emerge as out of kind of this time of plague.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting because I feel like when people begin to see themselves represented in art, you begin to see a shift in society.
Absolutely.
So like, you know, I think, you know, that's the reason why Black Panther was so like crazily successful, because not that, you know, there hadn't been Black actors. I think Blade was a Marvel movie,
Yeah.
you know, but there was something about it being set in the continent, you know,
yeah.
and there was something about it being just such a unapologetic Black cast. And there was something about it like that it gave depth to people of African descent, like in no other way that any art form ever did. It was always either they are the, you know, the one Black person, like Blade is like the one Black person in the entire movie, and he's like the hero, but he's the only Black person in the entire movie, right? Whereas with this, like, you know, the white actors were actually in the minority, and that was so different. But then they did such a great job of showing the struggle within the Black community with Killmonger and Black Panther.
Yes, the
And
two dichotomies. Yeah.
Yes, and that relationship. And for the first time you saw a villain that you couldn't, as a Black person, a villain that I couldn't see as a villain. Like, I couldn't see Killmonger as a villain because I understood where he was coming from. And I remember there were scenes in that movie, like the whole audience was like, oh, like the whole audience responded to it, because I was in a mostly like the theater was completely sold out for like weeks. And most of the audience were mostly Black people. And so I remember the scene where Killmonger, where he dies and he said, I'd rather, you know, die here free than like as my ancestors who jumped off the ships, who knew that death was better than being being enslaved. And it was like you could hear a pin drop because everyone in that theater understood the context of what he was saying. And I think it's given a whole generation, not only of African American youth, but, you know, young people across the board a completely different, and this idea of an Afro, what are they calling it? An Afrocentric future,
Yeah.
right?
Like Wakanda?
It
Yeah.
brings ideas. And so that's a big reason why I really wanted you to speak to this, because I think that art has this power to say this is what is possible.
Mm.
And then when you see yourself represented on the screen in such a positive way, but then you can also see the struggle that, you know, Killmonger was having, and, you know, you saw it all. So yeah, I mean, I think that that, you know, the importance of the arts is so important to healing this this rift, I think.
Yeah.
And when we see more of what you're talking about in theater and in dance and in music, then we'll see a lot of that begin to have an impact on society as a whole.
It already I mean, you know, just absolutely representation, we know, is key, whether it's in the arts or it's in industry or it's in politics or it's in education. All representation is key to healing that divide and to lifting up for any kind of oppressed, historically oppressed people, and you know, theater wants to be a part of that sea change. You know, if we took the, you know, it's now cliche to talk about Hamilton, but Hamilton was a major game changer for the Broadway community.
Yes.
And every generation has its musical that kind of defines that generation. And Hamilton is the musical for this generation that has defined this generation. It's really an inspirational thing to witness and see, and to be able to see it happening behind the scenes as well as on stage is something that I'm very keen to be a part of, and interested in helping to amplify and you know, give space for.
Thank you so much, Anissa, for that. Like, I had to, you know, I'm sorry, y'all. I think sometimes people really underestimate and undervalue the power of the arts to create change and to shift people. And I've seen it personally happen. So I'm sorry, I went off on that for a little bit, but thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're in the theater and that, this is what you're doing. And so we've just learned about, what's happening in the art world as far as trying to balance out the imbalances of representation. We've heard from, that was Anissa. We've heard from Melissa, who's kind of gone through her process of how she has been able to engage in conversations and keep them going. And we'll now speak with Hoda. And I really am interested in Hoda's perspective on the role of, the word I'm using right now is white passing, but I'm actually considering just changing that altogether because, I think that what I've learned doing this particular cohort is we have a number of people in the cohort who are Persian, and their experience is, white people don't see them as white, but so they're treated, there's a certain way they're treated because they're Persian, but then they're treated much better than Black people. So it's a really interesting space to be in. And so in looking at what it means to be an immigrant to this country, so regardless of your background, what does it mean to come to this country as an immigrant? And so Hoda is going to really speak to the need for people who are immigrating to America really becoming a part of the anti-racism effort and aligning themselves with that effort. So Hoda, there you
Well,
go.
I really enjoyed your course, and I'm glad there's one more class left. So there's so much more that I can still learn. I just want to really share my personal experience because, you know, I mean, in my mind, even before I came to the United States, I really believed in a kind of a different America, you know, the land of liberty, justice, equality for all, this beautiful garden of humanity that, you know, everybody was treated equally, a place even where Black people, you know, that Black is beautiful, Blacks thriving in the United States, alongside of everybody else, and great opportunity for everybody. But honestly, the first day I arrived, it was a wake-up call. And, you know, we arrived at New York with my family. I was a very young woman then. And all of a sudden, you know, we arrived at New York, went through different parts of New York, Central Park, Fifth Avenue, all the pretty places. And then all of a sudden, our cousin, who was driving a very nice car, a little Rolls Royce, he kind of made a wrong turn, and then all of a sudden his whole body, his whole persona changed. Lock the doors, don't go there, don't look at them, keep your heads down, we've got to get out of here as fast as possible. I mean, it was a totally different shock to my system. And because being very inquisitive woman, I looked around and everybody I saw was a person of African descent. So my whole reality was crushed. And I think as an immigrant, if you don't, that's why I love the theme of your class. That's why I joined it. You know, the moral imperative. You know, the need for revolutionary change in white America, because honestly, the narrative of white America is totally is pretty much anti-Blackness. There's two Americas, one white, one Black, separate, unequal, and hostile. And, you know, so you see this, and then as an immigrant, when you come over here, you really have to make a very conscious effort to, if you don't understand the history of racism in America, if you don't understand the legacy of institutionalized race-based prejudice in America, how it affects jobs, housing, education, healthcare, everything from cradle to grave, how it is set up in order to benefit whites and at a cost to Blacks. If you just don't want to swallow that poison of white supremacy, and I think an immigrant such as myself who sees this, the moment we come here, we just have to be aware of how we can be so easily trapped into swallowing this poison and being a part of it and perpetuate this. That's why I think it's this cognitive dissonance, or this total lack of the ideology matching belief is like a sickness. And this is what I kind of really learned in a segment of your class, which you really beautifully explained what was happening to people of African descent, millions of them being taken from a stolen country, and, you know, the process of them being, you know, eventually ending up in the United States. And then you said, what is the mindset of a white American who would just watch this happen day after day, week after week, year after year, decades after decades, 100 years later, centuries after century. And then we wonder why there's conflict, there's dissension, there's discord, there's hate, there's enmity, there's estrangement, there's apathy, because it's set up in the system for white America to perpetuate this lack of caring, because it's in its epigenetics. That's how it's so sick. So I just think, you know, just being fortunate as a immigrant, you can stop it right there, and you can make sure that your future descendants don't swallow the same poison. Because my kids, and they're grown kids right now, if I don't change them, if I don't teach them the truth about, you know, the plight of the indigenous people, you know, how in jobs, housing, education, healthcare, everything, etc., you know, whites are at a winning level at a cost to people of African descent. They're going to look at people of African descent. They wouldn't want to be with them. Exactly what the plan is. Don't go there, don't live there, don't be with them, don't go to school with them, don't send your kids to school there, etc. But we immigrants have an opportunity because it's like a frog in a boiling water. If you've been here for decades, you keep cooking in it. But if you see it and you come here as an immigrant, you have an opportunity to jump out of this big pot of boiling water. And the best thing out of being in America is being able to make meaningful friendship with peoples that are totally different, diverse people, people of African descent. The Baha'i writings they're called the pupil of the eye. So it is a great opportunity the United States can offer you to have these relationships across ethnic boundaries, national boundaries, cultural boundaries, and really find that and make that garden of humanity, which America is supposed to be, and make it a much better, richer, more reflective of what it's really about, or what it can be.
Thank you so much, Hoda. So, so for someone who's coming here as an immigrant, what would you say would be helpful for them to know either before they arrive or once they arrive? And how would they do that?
There's got to be structures in place. I mean, you know, I guess we can only control the spaces that we're in.
Right.
You know, I happen to be a member of the Baha'i faith, so it's very good that Iranian immigrants like myself who are jammed because we come over here because of the extreme persecution of the Baha'is in Iran, and hundreds and maybe thousands have come to the United States and America. As soon as they arrive, for like, you know, Baha'i institutions to educate them along the same things that you have in your course. So that they have a true understanding, so that they don't, they don't say, well, you know, I was oppressed, so, and I'm okay. Whereas they don't understand the powers of anti-Blackness, how strong they are, and how they have great privilege just because of the color of the skin, the fact that they're not people of African descent. They have much more opportunities, so that they would avoid language, behavior, attitudes that would really hurt and turn and really just really undermine and upset a spiritual community who is there to who really believes in the oneness of humanity. So I think that's one space. Faith communities can play a very large part. But of course, schools in America must teach that there's only one race, the human race, and that we're all 99.99% genetically identical, no matter what our phenotypes, skin color, etc. is. Because they say 97% of the children in America don't know that there's only one race, but we're not treated as one race, one people.
Thank you so much, Hoda. So we were just joined by Anissa Aga Chen. So hey, Anissa, the other Anissa, Anissa Aga is also in our current cohort. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And she says immigrants should learn the history of the country. And let's see here. Leah said to Melissa, thank you, Melissa, for that incredible synopsis, especially in regards to planting the seeds little by little with compassion and understanding, hoping for them to grow. And then Catherine has a question for you, Hoda. As an immigrant, do you think that anti-Blackness is a purely American phenomenon? Or is there also anti-Blackness within Persian culture?
100%. The doctrine of white supremacy, this fallacious doctrine of white supremacy has been transported all over the world and very much in Iran. And actually 15% of the people in Iran, although a lot of Iranians say that we're a very homogeneous population, they're very wrong. We have a great diversity because it's a huge country in terms of its geography. 15% of people trace their ethnicity to people of Africa. And in Iran, we also had slavery. In Iran, and it wasn't even over until 1927. So colorism is very much in Iran, is a very strong feature in Iran, just like it is in India, just like it is in Latin America and other places. However, the difference is it's not institutionalized race-based prejudice in Iran. Your jobs, housing, education, healthcare, etc., is not impacted so much because of the color of your skin.
Interesting, because it's interesting because in places where slavery in Central South America and the United States, where slavery did exist, it became systematic. So that colorism does have an impact on whether you get the job or how much you're paid or where you can live or how you're educated. And so it's just really interesting because when I lived in Korea, definitely there's a lot of xenophobia there. But, you know, and I will say that it was hard for my darker skinned friends to get jobs in Korea. And I had parents pull their kids out of my class because they found out I wasn't, you know, they saw I wasn't, you know, white. But I will say that within, you know, I never got the feeling when I was living in Korea of, it wasn't the same as what I get here. And it's hard to explain, but it's just not as virulent, I guess. I think in Korea, because it is very, very homogenous, let's just be real, like it's a different mindset. But I definitely saw the impact of race and racism and how things are portrayed in Korea. So this once again comes back to the media. You know, I did a course on the history of hip hop because I saw like this music video of this really popular Korean group, and they were dressed in like stereotypical Black clothing. They had blackface on, and I was in a McDonald's and they had it on the screen and people were laughing around me. And I was just like, oh my God, this is what they think of Black people. So then I did this course on the history of hip hop to help, you know, people understand that this is rooted in something, and to help people to understand that the connection that was there between the present and the past. But a lot of that came from how America portrays Black people in the media, right? Because what they get is, and this is just, I will say this, like Korean people, they were just real, like, just like very upfront. They didn't know that certain things were like, oh, you know, you wouldn't say in America, but they were like, yeah, you know, when we see Black people, they're angry. So this is their understanding of what it meant to be a black person, that they're angry and that very sexual, you know, very promiscuous. And that's what they knew. And then they did my course and they were like, oh, we thought Black people were like this, but they're actually not like that. And I'm like, no, but this is what comes out. And this is, you know, when, you know, Hoda was speaking to that, just those differences that exist. And I think part of it is when, you know, slavery has existed all over the world, but not chattel slavery, which was very different from, you know, capturing people after wars. And, you know, it was for that one, and they sometimes could work themselves out of slavery, but it was never from one generation to the next to the next. So thank you so much, Hoda, for speaking on the, for speaking about the importance of immigrants, being aware of the history of racism in America, being aware of the systemic aspect of it, so then they don't feed into that, and they can choose not to. They can make an educated choice not to engage in that behavior, right? Let's see. So Mom,
Yes.
I can't call her Liz. Okay, Liz.
Yes.
So I have a question here from my Anissa Aga, who, by the way, was my roommate at Maxwell. First year I was there, just let you know. Yes. And she says, what makes racism systemic versus not systemic? So what makes it systemic in some places and not in others? Is that what you're asking, Anissa? You can just say yes or no in the chat. And then she's saying, what factors should we look for to distinguish between the two? And I'll put it to you first and let you think about it, but then everyone else can answer this question as well. So, so how about this? Because I think that's a really deep question. I want to give all of you some time to think on it. I'm going to ask you a different question, Mom, for now, and then you can answer this later.
Okay.
We're coming back to it, Anissa. Okay, Anissa clarified that what I said is what she meant. So what I'm interested in, Mom, is this. So something that has always been a pet peeve of mine, and you know, yes, is white people marrying Black people because they want to have pretty babies.
Oh.
And you know, and not truly understanding the impact of race. And how, and I think the idea that if you're married to a Black man, then that makes you not racist. And, you know, the number of white women I've run into, because I don't run into many white men who are married to Black women, honestly, like they're like really rare. They're like really rare. So I can only really speak to my experience with white women who are married to Black men that, that insist, you know, that race, like they don't think that racism exists. I run into that. So you being the mother, you know, you having children who are biracial, what are things that you learned as a mother of children who were Black and white? What did you learn? And what advice would you give to parents who have children who are biracial? And particularly the parent who is not Black. So this could also be for fathers who are white or Persian. But you know, the parent who is not Black, what would you say would be some advice you would give them? So one, what did you learn? And then two, if there's any advice you would give.
Gosh, that's really kind of a deep question in some ways. I think I started learning about white and Black in kind of a different context. Back in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot more political activism. But even back then, I realized that well-off white people who would get involved in civil rights or, you know, maybe the peace movement, if everybody got gassed and, you know, arrested, the white people always went home and the Black people stayed in jail. And very often it was the white people, the white young people who created the chaos that led to the police gassing everybody and whatever. So I kind of had already learned that. I think one of the important parts about my life as the wife of an African American is that we were very poor. And if you look at now, it's more common now to see married couples in different levels of society, but most of the people that I'm also a Baha'i. So most of the people that I knew that were had interracial marriages, they were well educated, lived in the white community, and were pretty much not dealing with the reality of what the Black community deals with. So I got to live in the Black community as just a mom. I mean, it was, you know, it was unique for me. So I actually came to sort of a real internal realization that about this two separate worlds. I mean, it was just so obvious, and that everything in the Black community is not hunky dory. You know, there are people that are Black as well as people that are white that have so destroyed by life circumstances, whether it's abuse or whatever, that are very dangerous. So there's no, you know, I think I learned early, you know, and that's been something I've had to learn more and more, that the one of the biggest challenges for white people, I think, is for white people to become truly human and to stop trying to be something they're not, regardless of what it is. You know, you're not going to be, you can't make yourself into a Black person to be acceptable and, you know, use all the slang and the, you know, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of that people, human beings, have to be who they really are. And they have to be willing to be honest enough with yourself to know when you're not being authentic, when you're just whatever. The second thing, though, is when my kids were wild as shit. Excuse me, my French, but wild as all get out when they were teenagers. And one of my really good friends that was a Black man, I can remember standing on the front porch of my house with him, and, you know, he already knew there were some rough things going on. He said, "Liz, you know, you're going to have to remember, you can't let your kids do what you did because you were white. They can't get away with the things that you got away with." And you know, there was this old bull crap thing in my head, you know, moms, if you're a good mom, your kids are going to be happy. You know, if you're a good white person, you're going to look out for people that don't have the same privileges that you have. So I let my kids get away with all kinds of stuff that they shouldn't have. And when I finally just started acting like a mother and just said, you know, you're going to sit down, close the door, shut up. You know, I use my plastic bat on you, or I'll send you to jail. You're not going to go out and hang out on the street when you don't want to come home. You know, I just had to, and one of my friends, that's actually a really good friend of Adelia, said that, you know, you just became a Black mama. And Black women don't treat their children differently. And I don't understand all that anyway. But, you know, you've got to, there's a lot of white people just, there's this thing about being right and looking good. And, you know, even if you're, there's just too much artifice, you know. And so I can cuss better than probably most sailors. I mean, I can have a full conversation and nothing but curse words. But, you know, I can also communicate without curse words. But there's a time for people to just be real. Just be real. I mean, and I think that being around African Americans in everyday situations is really what saved me. And it had nothing to do with my intellectual capacity. So I recommend to anyone who really wants to become anti-racist on a deep level to have multiple home relationships with people that are Black, and not and down in the bad communities. I mean, Vahid, my son, went to Morehouse in Atlanta. It's one of the most famous, predominantly African schools. He lived in a neighborhood where there were people walking around with AK-47s, and you never see the cops unless it was like 12 vehicles. But he volunteered in a school, and there were tons of just everyday families, moms and dads with kids that walked their kids to school in that neighborhood. And yet, even people who thought they were really caring about Black and white just would never have gone to that neighborhood. Because, and to me, that's just, so anyway, I don't know, Adalia, if that even had anywhere near answered what your question was. I can't remember now what your question was. But.
Dang, Mom. I love it. So yeah, I think you did, Mom. And I think it was that it was important that white parents understand that their children who are mixed cannot be treated as if they are the white parents' experience, right? That
Right.
And I think honestly, like that's one of the most heartbreaking things. I think that's becoming a light bulb is going on for parents of mixed children right now, because they're realizing, my child can go out the house and not come home. Right? Like there's a real possibility of that. And I think that and then there were things that like white kids could get away with that, that, and for all intents and purposes, it didn't matter that our mom was white. The fact that our father was Black was it. Like we were Black, and that's how society saw us. That's how the police saw us. That's how the teachers saw us. Everyone saw us as Black. So it didn't matter. So let me make that very clear. And it didn't matter that I'm as light skinned as I am. It didn't matter, right? That and if you were caught doing something that a white kid would have gotten away with, you went to jail. Or, and I know that there were experiences, I think too, you have to also understand the education system and how it is systemically created to disenfranchise Black children. So if as a white parent, you just are assuming that your mixed child is being treated like all the other kids, and all the other kids is really speak for all the other white kids, you have another thing coming. If you're not staying on top of it, your kid will get tracked into the class that is not being challenged, and they will stay there for the rest of their education career unless you intervene. But you have to stay on top of it. You have to recognize that this is an issue, and you have to be looking.
Adalia.
Yes, Mom.
Adalia, let me make one just real quick. I think anybody who has an interracial child, and if you're white, whether your father or the mother or both or whatever, it is supremely superior and blind to not be sure that child has experiences in all Black situations. Make friends with somebody somewhere where they can go and sit down, go play with the kids in the neighborhood, and you not even there. They have to realize that they have to their whiteness is such a heavy burden. And kids that are Black that grow up with a heavy white, like make-believe thing are really, really in danger. Because they're disconnected from their Black roots. If it's not, and it just go into a few gatherings once in a while where you got a white person and Black person, that is nothing. People have to take those kids and they need to be in environments where there's nobody around that's not Black.
Mm-hmm. And I think that for us was really powerful growing up in predominantly Black communities when we were younger. I think that was really helpful. Vahid is actually in the chat. And he says he got robbed at gunpoint at one point when he was there. He said, "Shake my head." And let's see here. We've got some other responses. So, wow. Okay. So, and Nika saying, "Oh my God, this is the best thing on the internet right now." Thank you, Nika. Let's see here. Barbara has a question, and Anissa had a question as well. And I kind of want to go back to Anissa's question. Are you guys okay with us finishing at 9:30 to get these two questions, and then we'll head out? So we have about 22 minutes left. Thank you, everyone who stuck with us here. But I did want to get to these two questions in particular. Let's see. So Anissa was asking. So once again, her question was, what makes a system racist and not racist? And how do you see the difference? And she said that, she feels like, what did she say here? She suspects that all of it is systemic, right? So I suggested, is it possible that even systemic racism is on a spectrum? That there are places where racism isn't as systemic as others. Do any of you guys want to kind of address that point?
Were we talking about that earlier in the week, Adelia, with Atlanta? I mean, Atlanta is just amazing. For those who have visited, lived, whatever, Atlanta represents, and it's part of the United States. So there's, all the laws that we talk about being systemic are there. But I just feel like the expression of life in the volume of people of color that live in Atlanta and do their thing in Atlanta, you just walk the streets of Atlanta anywhere and you just feel like this is how every city should be and feel in the United States. It just should. It's just amazing to me. Having been in Philadelphia and other places, San Francisco, I haven't been to Seattle. But, I just think that systemic racism, I think is everywhere, unfortunately. I don't know. I guess it's the power of the people and their platforms. So if you have someone who is a judge, or you have a circuit of judges that are doing their thing and they come with their own views, I mean, I think it's as systemic as the people in law enforcement or the head of education or whatever systems we're talking about. So, the more whiteness a judge has, or the more whiteness a superintendent has, I think that's probably going to be reflective of how they express that law or the outcomes of that law.
Interesting. Thank you, Melissa. Hoda, sorry.
It's okay. Actually, I was just thinking that in trying to explain how things are becoming systematized, let's just use one part. Like, let's use a criminal justice system. We know it's in healthcare, we know it's in housing, in jobs, etc. But when this Massachusetts judge asked the researchers to find out why are there more Blacks and Latinos incarcerated, that he just found out the results where it's not just it's a few apples that are bad, it's the tree is bad. For example, we found out that in the criminal justice system, the cops in the states are more likely to stop Black drivers. The police are more likely to search or investigate Black residents. Law enforcement agents charge Black suspects with infractions that carry, harsher penalties. Prosecutors are less likely to offer Black suspects plea bargains or pretrial intervention. The judges sentence Black defendants to longer terms in prison, and the average white felon commits a lot more severe crime than the average Black inmate. So can you see it's so systematized? It's not just one bad cop. The system from the bottom to all the way to the top is defunct. And it's based on attitudes, behaviors that has been there for 400 years and is still perpetuated.
Thank you so much, Hoda. Yeah, Mom?
I'm sorry.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one thing that we have to remember is that part of the whole thing with racism, it's about power. And that, Adelia could tell you the story about being arrested in Atlanta and being made to, wear an orange jumpsuit and being put in a cell with numbers of women with only one telephone, and the room next door that had 2 working phones, and all the officers were Black. So this is not, racism is a disease that affects everyone. And at the same time, to end it, people have to give up the need to somehow be more powerful than somebody else, regardless of what color they are.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And I think what Anissa may have been asking about, because we were talking at the time about systemic racism existing here in America and in, Central and South America, those areas because of the institution of slavery. So they had to put systems in place to keep this, enslaved Africans under control. So they put these systems in place that have persisted. And I think, to make it clear, Anissa, that is not what happened in Iran, right? That is not what happened in England. That is not what happened. So I think probably the only other place that could potentially be similar to America would be India with the caste system, right? But
South Africa.
What were you saying, Melissa?
South Africa.
South Africa, yes. South Africa. So that's where, for me, where systemic comes from, is a system put in place to keep a group of people oppressed over centuries of time, right? So I have this one more question that Barbara had, and Mom, she put it directly to you and I, this question from Barbara. To be a mixed family, so she got this email from someone, a white woman who wrote her this email. So Barbara is saying, this woman said to her in an email, to be a mixed family means to be ostracized by both Black and white. We have heard over and over again about how Black women feel about Black men marrying white women.
So the question
You
I
know,
want is
I
that
mean,
the same reality? Do you find the same? Is that what you think, or is that just a person's reality?
I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for my mom, but yeah, go ahead, mom.
Well, I do think that, you know, part of this historical context is the sexual relationship between men and women of color and men and women that were white. And that Black women were used by the white men and the white women were protected. And to some degree, if I was a Black woman, I'd be pissed off if the best guy in the neighborhood was married off to some white woman that didn't have to deal with shit, you know? I mean, I would feel some kind of way about that. I mean, I think that's a legitimate kind of resentment, I guess, if you let it be that way. I was so naive. I mean, I was way back in the, people getting shot in the streets. I mean, I worked with the Black Panthers and got gassed and, marched with with SDS. I mean, we were much more naive about the implications of race. We just were fighting we were fighting. I mean, we're fighting. And even early in my years in South Carolina, we were attacked fairly often, but living in the Black neighborhood, it was like, now there were some women, I think, that wanted my husband, who probably were upset, but in terms of general acceptance, I was spiritually in the best condition I had been in my whole life. I mean, Black women, and I mean, living in a Black community was like having a human family. It wasn't this, and I had grown up in a family, but it was pretty tough. And I'd given up on being the right way white American. I mean, I just wasn't about to follow the rules of all this hypocrisy. But even when I felt like that, it was all more in my head. But it wasn't until I'd lived in the Black community and been loved by old people and young people and neighbors, and that I really began to feel like a human being. So in terms of marriage, marriage is a sacred obligation. I mean, it's something that in terms of society, I think that much of the problems we have in our society will improve when more white men and Black women get married. But I do think there's a fair amount of there is a lot. I mean, I sometimes don't even want to watch some of the movies that have a Black guy that gets all excited about some number 10 blonde blue-eyed booby. I mean, it kind of just makes you feel like the women are being put down. So some of that has to do with being a woman, I guess, that it isn't about the color. But I mean, we're in a transition period where I don't know that any of that's going to go away anytime soon.
Right.
I mean, I'm blonde and blue-eyed, but I never felt, I didn't have big enough boobs to make it into the club. Sorry.
The club. I love it.
Well, I think that, I think the question of Black men marrying white women and is I think that a lot of it has to do, once again, with this history. And there's a level of fetishism, I think, around it. I think also because it was the one thing that like could get a Black man lynched, is if a white woman accused him. Even if he never, I mean, Emmett Till died. He was tortured to death. 14-year-old was tortured to death because the white wife of a white man said he whistled at her. This child was tortured to death for that, right? So, and then years later, 2017, she finally fesses up and says she lied. And she's now apparently too old to put in jail for it. Anyway, that takes me all off. But I think that there's so much more going on here, Barbara, just to kind of to address that. There's so much more going on here.
Oh yeah. Oh boy, yeah.
Than just a Black man marrying a white woman. It's and especially if it's a Black man who's been able to in some way rise above the what's been holding him back. If he's been able to go to Harvard or Yale and get himself, out, a well-paying job, and and then for him to marry a white woman, I could see that, but understand that it's more than, it's not about class. It's about, for hundreds of years, Black men and Black women were treated like dirt. And when, the very rare time that a Black man is able to rise above this, what's happening here, with oppression, that he leaves the Black woman behind, and she ends up, and I think there's a lot more going on here. It's so much deeper than what this, the email was to you. And that's just my feeling. And my experience is living in the Black community, that was more comfortable than white people never accepted us. They never accepted us at all. And I am not exaggerating. The white people never accepted us. I remember showing up. My mom was getting her hair cut in a salon. I must have been like 21 or 22. And I walked into the salon because she had I dropped her off and I was coming back to pick her up. I walked into the salon. You could hear a pin drop. Kid you not. All these white women, it went silent. And when I called her mother, when I said mom to her, you could, it was like, you could see people looking at each other out of the corner of their eyes, like we did not know that she had Black children. And like the whole vibe in that salon was like, it shifted dramatically. And but that would have never happened in the Black community. We go into a barbershop, guys look at you, because that's just how it is. But hey, you walk into a barbershop and, hey, how you doing? Sit down. I'll get to your hair. People start talking to each other. You go into a Black women's salon, same thing. So from my experience, that has not been the case in the Black community. And I think a lot of it for white women, and because I know now it was a white woman who wrote this email to you, Barbara, I say this: she needs to question where she's coming from as a white woman, right? Because the reality is that within the Black community, white women, if you're a white woman trying to kind of interact with Black women, you got to just come correct. Just to be honest, like you can't come into that space because, people of African descent are the pupil of the eye. The pupil sees what's before it and it perceives it. And if you go into a Black community and you act as if you're better than people, or like my mom was saying, you're inauthentic, people see through that. And when they see through that, yeah, you're going to get shade, to throw some lingo around. Yes, you're going to get thrown shade because you're not being authentic. They can't trust you. So, I mean, so that's the question. And that's like the deep part for her. So Barbara, see if she might want to join our moral imperative. I'll send you the link, because it sounds like she might need to be looking at herself and not at Black people. Because my experience has been, once again, the Black community has been extremely accepting of people in a way that the white community never has. And I have been a witness to my mother being embraced in the Black community. I've been a witness to that. Like, there are children who knock on my mom's door and want to just hang out with her and watch movies and drink hot chocolate and play with the dog and just have conversations because they love her. And I think that would never, I mean, in white communities, I have not heard that happening. Maybe it does, but that wasn't my experience, right? So, so yeah, I mean, that would be my suggestion, Barbara, is, ask her if she needs to work on, there's something sounds like she needs to work on, and understanding that there's so much more to this than just a Black man marrying a white man, a Black man marrying a white woman. That this is much deeper than that. And I agree with my mom that if more white men marry Black women, that is a really different, that's a really different thing there. And I don't think it's seen the same. It's not seen the same. So yeah. Anywho, y'all, it is now 9:28. I'm quite sure you're gonna go back and see what's happening, who's doing what in the election. I'm not. I'm gonna eat dinner. I'm gonna put on something on Netflix that is non-political, and guess what? I'll wake up tomorrow morning and I will get the recaps on Facebook, on NPR, whatever. So I just really want to thank you guys for making the time to be in this space and to have this discussion. This could have gone on much longer, but we want to be mindful of people's time. So I thank you to those of you who stuck here until the half hour. We were only supposed to be 1 hour. So I thank you so much for sticking with us. And any of you guys will have anything you want to say in closing before I go ahead and close out?
Just thank you, Adelia. The journey that I started on long ago with diversity and inclusion has really just blossomed and grown because of your class and the work that you led me to see that still needed to be done. So thank you.
I echo that, Adelia. Thank you so much. And it's such a service to, to the community, but to white people to be giving this class. And I highly recommend it. So anybody out there who's on the fence about taking this class, you should take it, especially if you're white or white passing.
Thank you, Anissa.
We highly recommend it. You don't just go from here, but you're also from the heart. And that really, really made a difference. So I can't wait for, do you want to tell people about your next cohort, when it is?
Thank you, Hoda. So yes, it's always good, that one person, right, that keeps you on top of things, right? Woo! So yes, my next cohort starts actually this Thursday. It's from 6 to 8. The deadline to register is this Wednesday. I'm putting the link here in the chat. So if you want to go there, and if you have the time, you're welcome to join us. And then I'm already planning for cohorts in the new year. So there'll be a cohort in January and a cohort in February. So be looking out for those. And we'll be doing another panel discussion. Melissa's keeping me on top of this. Another panel discussion in December. And so we welcome all of you to join us then. And yes, Mom.
And you had mentioned that you might have sort of a convergence, I mean, symposium for all of us, and
Yes,
at
I'm
some
glad you
point.
said that too. Yeah. So just to let folks know that I'm planning two kind of gatherings for people who attend the cycle breaker program, our moral imperative. One will be virtual, and still kind of deciding on the dates for that. And then the other will be in person, I hope, next February. So February 2022, having an in-person gathering for all of the graduates of our moral imperative. And so that we can like spend a weekend together, just kind of learning and growing and supporting and, you know, going to new levels of capacity for this. So yeah. Yeah. So
Can't wait.
I think
Revolution continues.
the revolution continues.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you guys. And I have a couple of questions here, but you guys can go ahead and head out and I'll stick on for a little bit longer to take some questions. Thank you so much.